Welcome to The Spirit of Business, episode number 75, Looking for a Deeper Question, with Matt Murphy and Sarah McCrum.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Matt. I have something that I'm pondering. There's a desire I have every now and then to ask some much deeper and bigger questions about the way that we do business. And these are not questions to which I have answers. I just notice, and I think this is true across most of the business community, that however much I try to manage my time better, do things better, do all the right things as best I can, and I don't think I'm particularly brilliant at it, but I'm also not particularly awful at it. It feels to me as though the way we do business is not natural. I guess that's what I really feel. It feels to me as though just like the very construction of it and the way that we tend to work is demanding in a way that I don't feel is healthy. Like, I'm happy to be stretched, and I'm actually quite happy to work hard. Things like that doesn't bother me very much. But I kind of feel we put ourselves, it's not exactly a treadmill, but we put ourselves under a kind of pressure that makes me wonder, why on earth are we doing it? Now, maybe I'm generalizing far too much and other people don't feel the same, so I should probably speak for myself and let other people think for themselves. And sometimes I catch myself asking, and I haven't really answered the question. I ask myself, what are you trying to prove, Sarah? What is it? What's the kind of hidden, probably rather shadowy motivation that makes me do things the way I do them? So that's what I thought would be an interesting thing to explore, not necessarily with a view to coming up with an answer, because I suspect everyone needs to find it for themselves, but to open up that territory of asking questions about business that we don't usually really ask.
I think it's a great topic, and I think it's certainly worth exploring. And I agree that it may not be one of these podcasts where we come up with a solution or a formula. So probably it's worthwhile acknowledging that particular regard. So when you were talking just then, I was starting to stretch my mind as to really trying to understand exactly what you were talking about there. So really getting a sense of what it is that you're really feeling in terms of this. And it is a feeling that you have at the moment. And you're right, it might be just solely to you, or it might be to me, it might be to the business community at large, but it's worthwhile, I think, trying to identify what that actually is. So the things that come to mind when you were talking then, and for me to search really for, first of all, understanding what you're talking about, and then secondly, about what the possible answers to that is. If I go back to what a business is about from my perspective, okay, and I go back into probably traditional means of that. Like, a business, I believe, has a purpose, okay? Now, obviously, we can talk about purpose around whether it's a grand purpose or whether it's just a purpose to do something, and how connected the business owners are to that particular purpose, and the things that we've discussed before. But a business has a purpose, and then it has I suppose, a feeling about itself. So it has a culture, it has values, and then it has structure and discipline. And you've heard me speak a lot about discipline in the past, and around, very successful businesses are typically disciplined in the way that they go about things. Now, discipline usually means that there's structure and consistency and replication and a methodicalness associated with it. And so when you were talking there, I was wondering whether this element of discipline can sometimes create the fatigue, which can sometimes create the what the hell am I doing on a daily basis, and is this sustainable? I was kind of searching, is that part of the thing that you're questioning?
I think what I might be questioning is more about priorities. I wonder what would happen if just as a thought experiment, even supposing we all worked 10 hours a week, what would we do? Like, if you could only work 10 hours a week and you're running the same business, what would you do? And if I could only work 10 hours a week, what would I do? Not because there's a magic about 10, but because it would absolutely make me think about what I do. So I have a feeling that actually it's a kind of discipline of repetitiveness, which makes me feel like that every now and then, because then I don't ask those kinds of questions, because I'm in a groove and I do the things that I do, and then I try to create as much creativity in what I do as I can, because I need that to feed my soul, otherwise I feel half dead. But it's like sometimes I feel like I'm trying to be creative in too small a cage, or it's really hard to describe. I'll just tell you.
Is it a length of time? And what I'm hearing is it's a sense of time, because you just said, what if you only work 10 hours a week? All right. Does that mean that naturally you're currently working, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, right? So therefore, if you're saying, what if you only work 10 hours a week? So that means you're obviously not currently working 10 hours a week, you're working more than that. So is it a quantum of time issue that you feel is the thing that's draining, or the thing that doesn't feel right?
It's not just about that, because it's anything that's about time is also about quality. But I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to an architect today, and we were talking about our farm and our place, and there was this thought that flashed through my mind that we could do such beautiful things here, and would I ever really get to enjoy them all? And it's not really about that specifically, but it's really a question about how do I choose to spend my days. And there are things that I've chosen to commit to, and I respect my choices, and I feel that they're the right choices. But I feel that the way that I do things makes those, it's like there's more sacrifice than there should be, or than there needs to be. And it comes, I suspect, from a kind of laziness of consciousness, or a laziness of spirit, let's say. And that's why I feel it's really related to the spirit of business.
Yeah. So I heard some words there that were interesting. The word sacrifice. I could hear the word joy. So you were saying that the architect conversation, the flash around this element of really enjoying the I suppose the benefits of being able to create something with the land that you've got. And then I heard the word sacrifice around what you're currently doing to sacrifice your time for not doing what creates joy. So is it a question around what you're doing with your time, and whether that's fulfilling from a joyful perspective, or whether it's just something you actually have to do because it's part of the discipline of business?
I think there's a psychology of the discipline of business which creates a kind of dissatisfaction. I actually get a lot of joy from a lot of what I do. Sometimes I wonder if there are old thoughts, like we live in a culture that makes work into a bad thing very
It's a
often.
four-letter word, isn't it?
I
That
mean, I've
we.
known people who've said you cannot put work together with the word enjoyment. For me, work will forever be something that I have to do to make money, and nothing more than that. Anything else has to have a different name. It's that. So it is. It's like a four-letter word, which I actually don't subscribe to, because I love working, but I feel like I pick up the culture. And so it's like there's this part of me that runs a different narrative, and it's it's strong enough to, like, it has an impact in some way. I'm not being very coherent probably, but I have a feeling it's not what sits on the surface. I think there is a genuine question, like, I live on a farm, and in the last 3 or 4 days I've hardly been outside, and I'm thinking, what is
Mm.
that? Okay, I can say we have 12-hour days here at the moment. It's not the summer. In the summer I'll be out more, whatever. But it isn't it isn't really that. There are choices that I'm making that I could make differently, but it takes such a tremendous uh, discipline and spirit and consciousness and kind of it really takes something to make those choices differently. It's easier to do more or less what everybody does than it is to really think it out for myself. I think that's really what's going on.
I actually understand what you're talking about, and I've had similar conversations with other business owners around this concept of work and discipline and joy, and and this the hard wiring that we have probably is growing up to think that the work is, that if you think about it, we often get told, hard work. The word hard comes behind before work a lot of the time. So and it was almost a badge of honor to say that you work hard and you're busy and it's hard work, as opposed to say, oh, actually, work's not that hard and it's quite easy and it's quite enjoyable. That's a foreign concept to probably what we get taught and wired as children growing up in families. And
Which is
so,
really true. It's not that hard, and it really is quite enjoyable. And yes, I would definitely like to do less of it. There is a time thing there as well, but it really isn't that hard. I mean, ever, honestly. And even the hard bits are interesting, and it's more enjoyable than many things that I would otherwise do if I think about it, and it's very purposeful. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that these two things can sit alongside each other.
yeah, and that's exactly right. That I often reflect and say, when I've had a tough day, for example, and I think, well, what does a tough day mean? Um, why do I feel exhausted or upset or angry or whatever is it at the end of the day? And all of it comes back to the one word being emotion, because typically I've done a whole lot of tasks during the day and solved a lot of problems, being running businesses and advising businesses all day every day. But at the end of the day, what makes one day harder than the other, or what makes one day better than the other? Because fundamentally, when I look at it from a task point of view, I'm doing the same tasks pretty much every day. It's just there's obviously an emotion that we attach to it at the end of the day, that or during the day, that makes us feel that particular way.
That might not have anything to do with the tasks at all. It might have to do with the energy of the day, or like the weather, or something completely different.
And that's exactly right. But we start to label it. And I think that's the point that I'm making, is that we label these things, and sometimes we can mislabel things. And I remember, it might have been you that told me this many years ago, that the actual feeling of excitement and the feeling of anxiousness from a physical sense can be exactly the same. It's just whatever label we put on it. And maybe there's an element of that we think, oh, today was a difficult day. Okay, it might have been difficult because you might have had, most of the time, the difficult days for me are where you have confrontation with a person, whether that's a client or whether that's a team member or whether that's a colleague or whatever it is. I find that's probably the most fatiguing part of it for me, is when there's strong views and confrontation and unreasonableness and those sorts of things that make me feel uneasy and not very good about the day. And therefore, I would then attribute that to being hard work or a hard day, as opposed to the days where you don't have that and you're able to navigate through life pretty well and enjoy, working alongside of people and working with people for a common benefit and outcome. They're the joyful days for me. And you solve people's problems and they feel good about themselves. So I often reflect and think, is it just the people that fatigue us? Is it the emotion that fatigues us? Is it the amount of time that we spend on a particular task that makes us not feel as joyful? And probably the answer is a combination of all of them.
Or resistance. It's kind of it's resistance to what is, resistance to what's actually happening, thinking it should be a different way. That's really where the emotion comes in, isn't it? It's like I shouldn't have to deal with this, or people shouldn't treat me this way, or so we have resistance to what's actually happening rather than it just being what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, and so I do think also that there's a time element to this because it comes back to your point about balance. I feel the same way, especially with COVID and lockdown, which we're currently going through again for the sixth time in Melbourne. Is that you end up spending a lot of time, in your office at home working because, but that doesn't mean I couldn't go out and do something of some exercise or some, just sit in the sun and do nothing for a little while or whatever it actually is. But we tend to just go from one task to the next task because that's what's in front of us. And it comes back to your point before about, are we really choosing what next task we're doing consciously rather than just doing because it's in front of us? And therefore we end up at the end of the day going, I actually have spent no time doing something that I probably chose to do. I've done a whole lot of things that has just been put in front of me at the time because somebody else has asked me to do something.
Yes, it reminds me of a conversation I had recently with a friend who had been talking to somebody who's a consultant to some of the top executives in Google. And there was something that he said to my friend that really stuck in my mind. He said, these guys that I'm working with, they'll do 16 meetings every day back to back in a row. And at one level, I get it. Like, I could do that, but I don't want to. I don't like, you have to be like a machine. Maybe you don't. Maybe they're not. But the feeling that I get is that you have to turn yourself almost into a machine to be able to do that. And I don't want that kind of life.
Now, I understand that, but I'm going to flip it around and challenge that for a second and say, what if those 16 meetings that you had are joyful?
Wouldn't make,
Okay,
but
or
that's not,
enjoy,
no,
there's enjoyment
no.
associated with it. And so for me, like I spend a lot of time in meetings and speaking to people, and, I actually enjoy speaking to people and being part of their businesses and solving their problems and enjoy the people that I'm actually dealing with. So I can have 16 meetings in a day where I'll feel really great at the end of the day because I've had 16 fulfilling meetings, and then I'm going to have 16 absolutely horrible meetings or a blend of the two. So you've made a choice to say you couldn't think of anything worse to have 16 meetings in a day. So my challenge is it because it's the type the content, is it the task, or is it what's inside of it? So that's probably the question that I've got for you.
Yeah, no, it's not about joy, even if there were joyful meetings. I don't
Okay,
want to live that kind of life.
which is a choice.
Yeah, I'm
And
really
that's where
clear
you really,
about
that's
that.
what you're talking about then, isn't
Yeah.
it? You're talking about choice.
Yes, and it's my free choice, in fact. I really can choose. And many of us, as business owners, we have far more choice probably than we realize and tend to give ourselves. But yes, it's really clear to me, even if they were all joyful meetings, which I can easily imagine because many of the meetings that I have, I really enjoy and they're
Mm.
beautiful and all of that, I would not want to be doing that all day.
Mm. And that's understandable. And I suppose all I was doing was really just challenging what it is that you don't necessarily want to do in terms of that. And for me, what I heard then was quantity. And the other thing that I heard then is about choice. So it's about saying, this comes back to the six reasons I talk about why people go into business, and one of them is work-life balance, for example. And I kind of put that in the category of choice, is that you get to choose when you do what you do, and I think that gives us this sense of freedom. Okay. And I think the word freedom is wrapped up in this as well, because you're free to do a task at that particular point in time when you want to do it. When you don't choose freedom and you don't choose to do something different because you just get drift along in a day because you go from one thing to the next thing, I think that's when it becomes unenjoyable, when you don't consciously make a decision around what tasks are you doing? Could I spend time doing something more productive or more enjoyable rather than just doing the thing that I actually feel like I have to do, or not even have to do that because it just gets put in front of me, so I'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to the beginning of the conversation because I think that there's one thing about choosing what you do and making sure you do the important things and thinking about all of that, and that's all fine. But it feels to me as though that's all in the frame. I've wondered. There's a thing they have in this area which is applied to restaurants, and they say this is a, I think they call it a slow food experience or something. Um, and it means that you're not going to get your food in a rush, and the whole place is created to. There's an environment and an experience around eating rather than just get your food as fast as you can and get out as fast as you can. And I was talking to a business owner recently who said, I don't like to be rushed, so I don't do things in a rush. And for me, it's not so much about slow or rush or not. I'm happy to be in a rush sometimes and not at other times. But I started to wonder whether there could be a way of doing business where we question a lot more, and yeah, I have a feeling that we would make really different choices. It's kind of like an experiment I want to play with, and I don't quite dare to because I'm in the middle of a business, and it doesn't feel like the time to mess with it, and I don't want to throw it away and create another one just so I can run an experiment, if you see what I mean. So I've kind of trapped myself. Um, yeah,
What I just heard then though is that there's a concern or a fear around going against what we typically do in business. So
yes,
business is actually
absolutely. I mean,
still,
it would be breaking
there's
the
a
rules
formula.
in a way.
Yeah, that's right. Because we know that there's a proven formula in business that suggests that if you do these things, then you're more likely to be successful. Okay. And so what you're talking about here is going against those principles to do something different. And what your concern is, then you're going against a proven model. And that's your concern because that could blow up potentially what you're currently trying to build.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it's going against a proven model. I think it's going against the habits and expectations of others. Because, we're never in business on our own. And so there are a lot of standards. Another thing that came to me is just pulling together so many little quotes I've heard recently. I was talking with a friend, and he said that he used to do business with the Aboriginals, and that when there were decisions to be made, sometimes it would take 1.5 or 2 years for a decision to be made because it would need to be discussed by the elders, and they were mostly women, older women, and they didn't have that kind of sense of time that we have in business. They have a different sense of time. It's not better or worse, but it's different. They're on a different timeline. And that really struck me. Not None of this is again because I want to be like that or I want to be like this. I feel I'm more in the questioning phase. It's like, oh my goodness, they make decisions on a different timeline, and we think and we praise ourselves for making decisions fast, generally speaking. And I started to think about rhythms and nature and seasons and all those kinds of things. So all of these things are rolling around in me and have been for months, maybe since I came to live on a farm even, and wanted to see how ecosystems apply to business. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely painting myself into I don't have any answers here place, which I'm fine with. It's really nice to air the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably my line of questioning is very much trying to explore, is there actually any answers to some of these questions? And probably that's why I'm prompting aspects of what you're saying to see if there's anything in there that you can unpack that goes, actually, there is something in that.
I mean, I feel like I could make some decisions, and I've done it in the past successfully to, manage my time in different ways and this, that, and the other, but I don't feel that that's what it's about. That doesn't seem to me to get to the root of the thing. I wonder, you have so many people in the world who are not very occupied. That's why that 10-hour question, it's like, what would it look like if a business was full of people who were working for 10 hours? From our current frame, it feels like, oh my goodness, that would be really hard because, it would be so bitty. And how would we get things done and all of that? But that's just from a current frame. And it's a thought experiment, and we could invent a whole lot of thought experiments as to how would we do things. I feel like it's almost like I want somebody to invent, maybe it already exists, a workshop for me where I, with some other people, could actually really question things that we don't usually question at all, rather than just say, how could I do this a bit better, or how can I fix this problem? It's like, is this even the way to do it? What are we?
So really, we're getting down to the, I suppose what we've been talking about is the detail
Yeah,
of things, whereas what you're talking about here is probably a higher concept. It's to say almost, well, what's the purpose or what's the point of doing these particular things, which may then have the secret as to then how that cascades into the day-to-day activities and life of a business.
I think it's actually asking, what is the real purpose? What am I really and truly trying to achieve? What am I really doing? And to what extent have I even thought honestly about whether the things that I'm doing every day are a great way to go about that? They're clearly, they clearly work to some extent. We do business and we have clients and all of those things. But I think that if we actually sat down, and I think this would be a really interesting thing for any business owner to do, and ask, what is it that you're really about in your business? And your business is a part of life, so it has to be a part of your life. What is that really about? And if you were going to design the way that you work to be extremely concentrated on achieving that thing that it's about, would you do it really differently? I suspect that we would, and I suspect that it's difficult because everyone else is rushing around doing things and keeping busy, which we know, like we all know how to do that, and propping up their stories about the reason why they're doing things so that they don't have to question too much. But I'm feeling this, it's like, oh my goodness, it feels such a rich area to ask questions. And then I say, well, can you give yourself the time to really do that, or had you better get on with what it's like it's all tied in with the very thing that we're discussing. Like, maybe I'd better just get on with things and I'll do it sometime.
Yeah, I understand that. Maybe we talk about purpose and we talk about why a lot. I was thinking about then is benefit, okay? Because what's the purpose has got a benefit, the why's got a benefit, and there's a benefit to yourself, and then there's a benefit to others. And I suppose it's you do something, and there's going to be an outcome, or there's going to be hopefully a benefit for doing so. And this is where we get into the concept of what's the benefit for you or for the people around you, for you to work 10 hours, 50 hours, to choose the tasks that you're doing or not choose the tasks that you're doing. But really, if we started to assess, is this good for me? Is this good for the clients? Is it good for the team members in the organization? Is it actually beneficial that I do this for a
And how
particular
beneficial
reason?
is it?
That's right.
And what could be more beneficial? And I was just thinking as you were speaking, supposing my purpose, it isn't this, but supposing my purpose was simply to share my book as widely as I possibly could. There are so many different ways of approaching that, most of which we never think about because we just go and think, okay, how do you market a book? Or how do you sell a
Mm,
book? It's just like we
mm.
just ask questions like that. I don't think those are the right questions to be asking.
What is the right question to ask then?
I'd probably need to take some time to reflect on that. What would be a really powerful question to ask in relation to that? I'm not sure that I know, but I'm pretty sure that the questions that I ask at the moment are not good enough questions. I don't mean that as like I'm not good enough. They're very ordinary questions somehow. They're quite good, but they're
Yeah.
ordinary.
So is that part of what you're feeling is that you're not asking or feeling that you're asking deep enough questions or significant enough questions to really understand, to get the real benefit from the work that you do?
I feel that I'm not asking the right questions or good enough questions. For me, it's not exactly about getting the benefit of what I do. That's a
Mhm.
part of it. It's about doing what I feel so strongly to do. If I do that, I don't need to think about getting the benefit. It is benefit. Like that's those two things are the same thing. Doing it is the benefit, if you see what I mean. I
Mm,
guess I guess it's something in that territory. I feel as though and I might be wrong here, so and I'm really willing to be wrong, but I
mm.
feel as though I scurry around like a busy little bee, busy little business owner, kind of doing all these things and I'm missing the point. I'm
Maybe
actually
you're
missing
not.
the point.
Can I
And
just challenge you on that one as well? Maybe you're
yeah.
not, because I was just thinking about you have choice every day. You could either choose to spend time working in your business, okay, or you can you've got time to choose to spend time working on your land, for example,
Hmm.
okay. And so therefore you have choice on where you dedicate your time to, and there's plenty of other things you could probably choose to do as well, but I'm just using those two things because they're quite pertinent and they're big things in your life. And so you're making and I knowing you well enough, I know you make a conscious choice, not a subconscious choice, that you go and you choose to actually spend time working on and in your business, okay, because I know that you are very strong on your purpose of why you're doing it and the outcome that you would like to achieve for the benefit of others and yourself. And it's very powerful work that you do, and it's work that you know it's important and you want to continue on doing so. So there's a really strong connection with the choice that you're making in terms of the work that you're doing and the reasons why and the benefits that come from that. Now, you could say, actually, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to do that today or whatever. I'm not going to do that for this particular hour. I'm going to go out onto the land and do something on the land. Okay. So you actually have a clear choice. Now you're choosing to spend time on your business or in your business as opposed to going and doing other things that you could choose to do. There must be a reason you're doing that.
Yes, there is. But it's really clear to me that the answer to whatever it is I asked at the beginning is fundamentally to ask better questions. That I know that if I had the courage to ask better questions, I would make better decisions. That's what I can see. I don't know what they would be because I've asked, as I said, I've asked some quite good questions, but I don't think I've asked really good questions. And I'm not sure that I've asked great questions. And that would be interesting to see what that would be.
That would be.
Yeah,
Could I challenge you, and you probably can't answer it on the spot, but what would be a great question?
we've already tried that, Matt. Well,
I'm a persistent person. I'm going to try again to see if I can challenge you on it because I know that you're up for a challenge a lot of the time.
so I can. It's kind of like I can feel the question, so I'll see if I can express it. Um, but given that what this business, let's say the main business and my main work is about sharing with people a way to transform their relationship with money and therefore gain all the benefits, the life benefits that come from that. And that what I can see as a result of doing that is a shift, even in our economy, to being able to work in a way that values what's really important in life. These are the things I see very clear, and I see, I feel very, very not driven, drawn to doing that. If I would sit down and ask myself, I don't want to ask what's the best way of doing that, because I don't believe there is a best. But if I would take some time to just really step back and reflect on what would be a truly powerful way of doing that, or an impactful. I can't find words that feel kind of juicy, that feel like they've got the real power in them. But I feel like I would come up with different answers from what I'm doing.
Mm.
And it's disruptive.
Yeah, I can feel it. I can understand really what you're trying to do, and what you're questioning. And it sounds like really what needs to be done is some really quite deep reflection,
Yeah, I reckon.
where you have some peace and you're really inwardly looking to determine and question probably pretty much everything that you're doing.
Yeah, and I'm
And I
not
don't think it's a
really.
question. I don't think it's a question around what you're doing, because I know that you connected with it. That's what we just said a minute ago. Very
Yes.
aligned with the purpose and the outcome of it. Maybe it's the deep questioning is around how you're doing it.
Yeah, because it runs through my mind, and this might not be the answer, but it's an interesting thing. It could be that, we spend days and weeks and months marketing this and marketing that and doing all the things you do in a business. And it could be that one meeting with one particular person could replace that 100-fold. And wouldn't it then be better for me to focus on getting that meeting than all the other stuff? Now, I'm not saying that's the answer, but it's a really interesting thing. And it doesn't mean we'd never market again. It doesn't mean anything except that would be more valuable than a whole lot of other things.
Absolutely, and that's about being very clear about what outcome you want to get and what's I suppose the most efficient way, and efficient. I'm talking about time and energy and cost of actually getting the outcome. And so it's a very practical example of what we try to strive to do in business is get great outcomes without having to go through this complete labor intensive time, money, and cost associated with it. So I certainly get what you're saying there.
And can you imagine running a business like that, and then having a team like that where everybody was beginning to think like that, and it wasn't on, hours of work, but it was on really high quality questions, a really high quality engagement with what are we really about. It feels so dynamic to me.
Yeah, and it comes back to this, concept of value. What's the value of the input and the value of time to get a particular outcome? You can either spend 100 hours doing something, but if you've got a really, I suppose, a person that's got an ability to get it done in an hour because of whatever particular reason, their value is worth 100 times. Do you know what I mean? And it's just trying to understand how that concept works too, which is difficult.
It's really difficult because it turns so many things upside down, actually. I mean, I know there are people in business who ask great questions and get better results, but I also know just how easy it is to, once you've got something working a bit, whatever a bit is at your level, you might be turning over 10 million or 100 million or 1 million or 500,000, but at your bit, you kind of get comfortable after a while, and then you stop asking such great questions. And then, sometimes a push comes, and then you ask more questions again. But yeah, I just feel the appeal of at least running the experiment. And maybe you're right, it's a question of taking a few days really out, or whatever time it takes, and actually give myself permission to do that, which is not something that I've done. I don't think
Yeah,
I've ever done it
and
like
then
that.
you might come up with an answer that may not necessarily be what you thought it was,
Yep.
and it could be something, you might come up with an answer to say, actually, I really like for me, and this is going to sound sort of counterintuitive to what we're talking about here, but I actually really enjoy um, the structure of doing and of achieving. So, and that can be even in simple tasks. I really enjoy being in the garden all day and cutting grass and weeding and doing things that are labor intensive for hours and hours on end. And I get a sense of joy and I enjoy it. Okay. And that's work. Okay. Now, I can get paid for that work, or I um, typically don't. But the point that I'm making there is that classified as work? Is it a four-letter word? Is it something of joy? Is it like what is it? And is that part of the answer as well?
I love, sounds really stupid, but sometimes my husband and I go and pick up horse manure from the neighbours. Actually, it's really fun. It's a completely meaningless task, except it allows us to make some extra compost. And, and is it really the fun? It's kind of not really fun, but it's really fun. So it's not about, it isn't about what am I doing. I think that the questions are really more about where there's something, like I do that to be with him, to be out in nature, to do something with my hands, all of that. It's not the most efficient way. I could go and buy it from the side of the road. But there's something nice about just being able to go next door and bring it and it comes onto the land. So there's something, this is also about real quality of life, quality of experience, not just quantity, if you see what I mean. I think that
Yeah, and I
underlying
think
my
that
questions is a search for a quality of experience that's just is something more than I've experienced before.
I have a framework that I talk to business owners about that is probably still not at this upper echelon of what you're talking about, but it still gets people thinking about what they're doing. And I ask the questions: are you doing what you want, when you want, in the manner you want, with whom you want? Okay. But it starts to get people to think about exactly what they're doing and whether they actually are enjoying the things that they're doing and they're doing it with the people that they want to do. Because you just mentioned then that you're spending time with your husband, Nico, and that's enjoying. That's, so you're doing it with whom you want. You're doing a task with whom you want. Picking up horse meal, I'm sure, is probably not necessarily what you want, but you're actually enjoying the benefit of the outcome, which is compost. And that obviously brings you some sort of sense of achievement and joy because of the outcome that you get from that. The manner you want, walking on a sunny day through fields and enjoying just the experience of nature is part of, choosing to do something in the manner you want. So all these things, I think, give us an opportunity to make clear choices around where we're spending our time and where we're committing our time, and are we doing it in to fulfill those four elements.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it might well be that at times we need to do things that don't fit with the what I want, except that there's a bigger choice that I want that makes me do that. So,
Mm.
there might be things that I do that I don't particularly want to do, but there's a bigger choice and I need to do it in order to get there. But it might be that I don't, again, I think there's an art in questioning and a value in questioning. I'm definitely going to explore it more. I feel actually a lot of power in this conversation, which I hope is shared, is not only for me.
Mm.
In simply giving myself permission to start to talk about it and explore it and see what comes out of it.
Well, I think it's good because it gets us to challenge ourselves. Because I often talk about people that wake up, or that they might be sort of heading towards a significant milestone birthday, whether that's 30, 40, 50, 60 plus sort of type thing. And I hear regret as I'm turning 50 or I'm turning 60 or whatever it is. And you can hear there's a regret in their voices, or there's a feeling that they're not happy about the fact that they're turning 50 or 60 or a milestone. And I often question why that would be the case. And I've said historically to people, I said, the people that I find that don't sort of go, that celebrate the fact, oh, actually, I'm turning 50 and I'm really pleased that they're turning 50, as opposed to, oh, I'm turning 50, I don't want to be turning 50, is that I find one of the fundamental differences is that the people that are actually okay with turning 50 is they've made clear, conscious choices throughout their life, as opposed to drifting and not making choices. And then all of a sudden turning up one day and going, oh, and looking back and going, oh, I've actually achieved what I want to achieve in my life, or done or made conscious decisions along the way. And I think there's something in that with this conversation too.
Yeah, and it's the beginning of a whole other conversation, because if I look at my life, what I'm doing is so much better than anything that I would have chosen. I mean, I chose it, but I couldn't have imagined myself ending up where I've ended up. So that's a kind of fascinating thing, like how did that happen? But I don't want to go there today. I'm going to sit today with this sense of really searching for a much, much better question. And
well, I'm really looking forward to you sitting with it and then reporting back to us and seeing what you've come up with.
The one thing I can say is that it's not scary, although I can behave like it's scary to challenge, because everyone else is rushing around doing whatever they're doing, and it's easy to do the same. I actually don't feel scared of it. Once I clarify what it is, I know that only good could come of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to discussing this further with you and really exploring it, because I think I love challenging things. I love the status quo. I love challenging the status quo and trying to just not do things for the sake of doing, or breaking wiring that may not necessarily be helpful. So I'm up for the challenge as well. I'm going to do the same thing.
Okay. Well, let's see what happens. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.
You've been listening to The Spirit of Business with Matt Murphy and Sarah McCrum. If you'd like some insight into the spirit in which you do business, a great place to start is by looking at your relationship with money. Find out more by taking the Money Scorecard at moneyscorecard.app, and we'll be back next week.